Okay, let's jump right into this explainer and trace the absolutely incredible career path of a guy who is, without a doubt, arguably the top computer vision expert on the planet right now, Andrej Karpathy. But hey, we aren't just going to rattle off his resume here. We're going to treat his journey like a masterclass. Basically, we're using his life as a mentor's playbook for our own careers. Because if you want to know how to navigate this wild, rapidly changing tech landscape we're all in, well, there's literally no better guide than someone who was there, building the foundation from the very beginning. So get this, 16 seconds. That is all it took a 22-year-old Andrej to completely solve a Rubik's Cube. Now you might be wondering, why does that even matter? Well, it showcases this incredibly early, deep-seated obsession he had with cracking complex patterns. And as we're going to see, that specific obsession, that drive to untangle the complicated and just make sense of total chaos, that would become the absolute bedrock for his massive career in artificial intelligence. But, before we get completely lost in the tech, we've got to look at the human drive behind it all. When Andrej was just 15, his family packed up, left a comfortable life in Slovakia, and moved to Toronto just to seek out better opportunities. He felt that. He deeply recognized his parents' sacrifice. And honoring that massive leap of faith, really just wanting to make them proud, became his core motivation. It's such a great reminder that behind pretty much every giant technological achievement, there's almost always a very powerful, very human why. To really unpack this, we're going to use his career as a sort of syllabus. We'll break it down into 5 key phases: the drive to build, learning from the masters, facing the reality of machine vision, architecting real-world AI, and finally teaching the next generation. Starting off with phase 1, the drive to build, where it's all about seeking hands-on impact. So back when he was at the University of Toronto, he was actually planning to go into quantum computing. I mean, sounds incredibly advanced, right? But as he was sitting there in these heavy quantum mechanics classes, he had a realization about himself. He just wasn't having fun. Quantum computing felt, well, too distant, too limiting. So he made a hard pivot right into machine learning. Why? Because he desperately wanted a field where he could roll up his sleeves, get his hands dirty, and actually see the practical, immediate impact of what he was building. Which brings us to this wonderfully relatable moment. Picture this. He's standing in a library, completely overwhelmed, just surrounded by endless shelves of books. And he has this charmingly brilliant epiphany. He realizes, okay, it is physically impossible for me to read and absorb all this knowledge. So, what if, instead of trying to learn everything myself, I just build a system that can learn it for me? That right there, that is the mindset of a true engineer. Shifting from, how do I consume this, to how do I build a tool to conquer this? Moving to phase 2, learning from the masters. Sitting at the feet of giants. If you want to be great, you need great mentors, and Andrej strategically placed himself under the wing of absolute legends. During his undergrad at Toronto, his intro to the fields was literally taught by Geoffrey Hinton, the guy universally known as the godfather of AI. Then, for his master's at the University of British Columbia, he's building physically simulated robots, teaching them to balance and fall using actual physics. And all of this tees him up perfectly to secure a PhD spot at Stanford. At Stanford, he got to work under Professor Fei-Fei Li, who is just a profoundly influential researcher in computer vision. And the way he later thanked her is so fascinating. He didn't thank her for teaching him some specific coding language or a complex math theorem. No, he thanked her for teaching him how to think. And honestly, that's what true mentorship is all about, right? It isn't just about picking up a new skill. It's a fundamental rewiring of how your brain approaches complex problems. Now for phase 3, the reality of machine vision, facing the machine. Okay, let's rewind to the early 2010s. AI vision back then was, well, it was pretty basic. If you showed an early AI a picture, you'd get this really stiff one-word label like elephant or husky. But at Stanford, Karpathy was pushing the boundaries hard. He wanted fluid, natural descriptions. Instead of just husky, he was getting the AI to output stuff like a husky mix completely passed out in a dog bed with one leg awkwardly sticking into the air. Today, thanks to things like ChatGPT, we kind of take that for granted. But back then, getting a computer to casually describe a scene like a human felt like absolute magic. But man, it was incredibly tough. Back in 2012, Andrej was actually super frustrated by how far behind AI still was. He wrote this fascinating blog post breaking down a funny photo. It was a picture of Barack Obama secretly stepping on a scale behind another guy who was trying to weigh himself. Just think for a second about the massive amount of hidden, instantaneous human reasoning an AI would need to actually get that joke. It has to understand mirrors, foot pressure, human self-consciousness about weight, the fact that the victim has no idea what's happening, and the sheer irony of the President of the United States pulling a middle school prank. We process all of that in a fraction of a second. Trying to teach a machine to do it, it felt like climbing Mount Everest in flip-flops. But then, the landscape shifted dramatically. By 2014, these image models were getting scary good, so Andrej decided to really test the limits of human versus machine. He entered the ImageNet showdown, putting himself head-to-head against Google's incredibly advanced neural network, GoogleNet. He literally locked himself in a room and manually, painstakingly, labeled 1,500 difficult images. And hey, he achieved a 5.1% error rate against Google's 6.8%, so technically he won. But the sheer, exhausting, mind-numbing effort it took for a human expert to just barely beat a machine, that was a massive wake-up call. That humbling realization made one thing crystal clear. Machines were catching up, and they were catching up fast. In some specific cases, the neural network was actually already better at spotting tiny visual differences than humans were. And this was a game changer. Because if neural networks were finally good enough to reliably see and perceive the world, well, that meant autonomous perception, like actual self-driving cars, was suddenly within reach. Which brings us to Phase 4, architecting real-world AI, taking it to the edge. By this point, his expertise was so undeniable that he became a founding member of OpenAI. His reputation just exploded. It got so big that Elon Musk personally poached him to lead the computer vision team for Tesla's autopilot. Musk actually wrote in an internal email that Andrej is arguably the #2 guy in the world in computer vision. He knew the OpenAI team was going to be furious about losing him, but Musk felt the hire absolutely had to happen if they were ever going to make self-driving a reality. Over at Tesla, he made this defining mentor-level move. He completely re-architected how the cars saw the world. Originally, Tesla processed every single camera feed separately. And as you can imagine, trying to stitch that together resulted in an awful, clunky 3D representation. Andrej changed the whole game. He routed all 8 cameras simultaneously into one massive unified neural network. So instead of the car trying to piece a puzzle together after the fact, the network just learned a beautifully unified, consistent 3D view of the road all at once. It was a total night and day difference. And finally, Phase 5, teaching the next generation, passing the torch. So after a brief stint back at OpenAI, Andrej realized something fundamental. The very tools of his trade were shifting underneath him. He actually coined this awesome new term, vibe coding. It perfectly describes modern programming. AI has gotten so unbelievably good at writing code that developers are shifting into these new roles. Instead of manually typing every single line, they're more like directors, just guiding the AI systems and curating the output. It's absolute proof that adaptability is everything when the tools of your profession evolve. He even threw out this staggering tweet recently, admitting, "I barely even touched the keyboard." Think about that, coming from one of the best coders in the world. He openly admitted he sometimes feels behind mechanically because AI generates so much of his code now. But here is the massive takeaway for all of us. Even if the actual typing is outsourced to AI, the people who can architect big-picture solutions and untangle incredibly complex problems, they have a massive advantage. His foundational problem-solving skills, the exact same ones he used on that Rubik's Cube and with his mentors at Stanford, make him completely irreplaceable. Today, he's basically gone full circle, pouring all his energy into teaching. He launched his own education company called Eureka Labs, creating these incredible deep-dive educational videos that get millions of views. And at the exact same time, after some crazy bidding wars in the tech industry, he joined Anthropic's pre-training team. So he is literally out there teaching their AI model, Claude, how to understand the real world. His entire focus right now is on passing the torch, teaching the next generation of machines while also mentoring millions of humans online. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a question to chew on for your own career roadmap. As AI inevitably begins to write more and more of its own code, how are you going to adapt your learning to stay ahead? Andrej's journey proves that the tools are always going to change, and the machines are only going to get faster. But that raw drive to build, the humility to sit and learn from great mentors, and the flexibility to constantly upgrade how you think, that is what keeps you at the absolute frontier. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive.